jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show.
Welcome back, ladies and gents. We got Alex Ingham from FanSided's and the Precinct TV blog back on.
Hello.
She was too awesome last time. I was like, oh, she's got to be able to discuss this show or that. 'Cause we're covering a lot of TV. Don't get me wrong. We do plenty of movies and everything, but, you know, not enough people are talking about, like, shows that have been on the air for ages. That there's a fan base out there, but there doesn't seem to be enough that want to actually sit down, and there's blogs that cover episode by episode, but there never seems to be anyone who does like a full DVD box set, you know, review often, which is a shame. So as a warm-up, how did you get into just mystery TV in general? You discussed a bit of it last time, but like, yeah, you had friends and family that were watching stuff like that. Was it always kind of an easy kind of thing to do? Like you'd watch it after studies or after work?
Yeah, it was mostly family. Like my parents would happily put on an episode of CSI or NCIS, and then, well, even
Nice.
Midsummer Murders, they would be on as well, and we just sit and watch them all together.
Very cool. So yeah, I knew this was a thing, and even if I was not watching something, I was paying attention to the ads, and I was just already in that mindset. Like when you're watching cartoons and everything, they always have like, they were still going by MTV Logic, where they had like bumpers, you know, we're going to be talking about this other show. This thing is coming on next. Don't miss it, you know, and you know, marketing guys were telling animators what to do. They'd have animated characters from that show talking about the other character's show with the other character's animated character talking, and they kind of would do a bit of this too, you know, like USA Network, which had definitely, NCIS can definitely rely on the strength of that for that network doing, you know, syndicating it nonstop. Is like they would often have, you know, Monk and the two characters, Sean and Gus from Psych, you know, just appearing in each other's ads, and it was just kind of a fun kind of in-between thing, because they would be on back-to-back with each other and just acknowledge that they're in some kind of universe on this channel, and it was fun. And yeah, USA would just play these this nonstop, because it was rebranding, you know, it had been kind of the cheesy cable TV network, and then was becoming kind of the sitcom network, and instead of just re-air all its hit shows, it was playing stuff like this, and it went pretty well with, you know, Burn Notice and all their kind of fill. They were just seeing what that resonated, and, you know, this was kind of a sleeper. NCIS was just kind of a sleeper hit for them, because so had you already seen JAG, or did you see that later? Definitely say on the latter.
I think I saw a couple of episodes. I'm sure that's probably one that my parents had on as well, but it was just sort of in the background.
It is
I
wild.
didn't pay that much attention. So with NCIS, I knew Michael Weatherly from Dark Angel. And as soon as I saw an
there you go.
episode, I was just like, that's the guy from Dark Angel. I'm watching
Just
this.
leads one into the other. There you go. And So you're gonna find this funny. My grandmother and one of her sisters, who was one of my aunts, loved the hell out of NCIS. My sister started watching it on USA casually. My mother got into it, and she's like, "Hey, that's Mark Harmon. He was on St. Elsewhere," you know. So everyone's recognizing someone, and then she's recognizing the FBI guy that Joe Spano plays, and we'll get into the character names. And she's like, "That's my dude. That's my guy from Hill Street Blues." So yeah, it is kind of funny how everyone would get into something for different reasons in different ways, and so it was playing nonstop on USA, and it's kind of weird how it used to have the full title and to make it people confuse it with CSI, which was often on at the same time. But yeah, my grandmother was not a fan of JAG. Just for whatever reason, she'd watch something casually like one of the Law and Orders or something funny like Bones. She needed something kind of like Murder, She Wrote, where it would be funny but also a very cool mystery. So if she could see a rerun of Monk on a local station or this, she was set for life. But she followed it pretty religiously. Always had my uncle set her son set a recording for it, and it was just neat to just kind of see is like. So I watched it very religiously for a while. Like the first 7 seasons, I fell out of it for a while, and then I rectified that about 5 years ago. I just kept catching up with it. So actually, no, I take it back. I had seen all the first 8 seasons and then season 9. And since my grandmother passed away, she's the ardent fan. I kind of just associated, this show with her. So this is a very personal show, but I said, the show must go on. Someone's got to keep track of Gibbs and Company. And so I said, lo and behold, let's see about the former Marine vet turned Navy federal Navy crime-related federal agent. And so, yeah, this show, as we speak, has been on for 19 seasons.
Yep.
Lo and behold. So it was a spinoff of JAG, Joint Attorney General, and it has spun off a Los Angeles, New Orleans, and Hawaii spinoff. Those shows have indefinitely crossed over with the new versions of Hawaii Five-0, Scorpion, the standalone show, as well as the new versions of MacGyver and Magnum PI. So pretty complex universe. There's even a separate Wikipedia entry calling the Belisario universe and the Peter Linkov universe. I'm like, good grief. It's one universe. They just call it the CVS universe. But yeah, no. So like you, I was just always just kind of seeing this become a thing. And it was just wild how there was always, you asked anyone about it, some people casually knew about it. And other people were just like big fans. They were digging the humor and the mystery and the action. And it was just kind of weird how it just kind of, I guess I'd explain it as kind of an X-Files kind of fandom. It just, depending on who you were, depending on who was watching it. Obviously, a lot of people were watching it because there's like, CBS would do the whole, #1 network. It's like no one even claimed that. It was like the ratings did not lie. A lot of people were watching this, and I guess you could say it's some kind of comfort food. I don't really know how else to explain it because I do, but I'm just, to a wider audience, it is kind of wild how it just kind of caught on in stages. And it is weird. Like my folks would probably have seen a show like this back in the day, but they never really saw something like this. They would see part of it because someone else was watching it at another house, like after a Super Bowl game or something like that. But it's just like, yeah, it's kind of wild how it kind of came in stages, and it keeps kind of finding some kind of audience. Like people are always binge watching or watching reruns of it, or have seen the actors in some other kind of thing, and they know that they're the funny agent or serious guy on something like this. So it is kind of wild. I know some people who, they're in the minority, but they only preferred some of the spin-offs of this. I'm like, really? Okay, interesting. Because it seems like this is like the main show kind of had the main was kind of the main intake, the main core of the audience group. So it was interesting to seeing people on kind of pull a CSI or Law and Order where they're like, I prefer that spinoff of this versus the one that started it all. And I can definitely see that for those other ones. There's definitely plenty of people who will swear by CSI Miami or SVU or Criminal Intent. That's the only version of the show they've seen, or even with the Star Trek. So it's funny how it was like, I would see someone who was watching LA on Ion Television or New Orleans on TNT, and I'm like, really? You know that one more? Is it because of the guy who's on the star of the show? You like LL Cool J or Scott Bakula? Okay, I get it.
I mean, I think that is what's helped with the NCIS spin-offs, is they've got the big names attached to them. So people are going to follow certain actors and what they're doing. And then New Orleans has the supernatural element to it slightly, you know, like when Pride was seeing the Red Man.
You're seeing a lot of minority-based crimes and a lot of just suburban kind of stuff, and just talking about kind of even stuff that was kind of the angst during the 2000s when Hurricane Katrina hit. Is like, we're going to get the city back on its legs while we play jazz. This is interesting. Escapism.
And I do like it had all the jazz in it, and it brought the New
it's
Orleans
really good jazz
culture into the show.
Oh,
whereas all the rest are kind of like, you know, you could have them set anywhere and you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell where they were meant to be set.
Very
Especially
true.
the main show, you know, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell it's meant to be set near the capital.
Oh, absolutely. Because like when they did that, like they, like you say, they were interchangeable, but very particular at the same time as well. Like it was kind of an unspoken. Okay, so maybe we should backtrack a bit. So NCIS stars Mark Harmon. That's right. The Mark Harmon from Chicago Hope and St. Elsewhere as Special Agent Gibbs. And we're not going to get into all the nonstop actors and cast, so I'm just going to say the crew of unusual agents, the Israeli Mossad agent on loan, Ziva, the perverted yet over-the-top wacky agent with a heart of gold, Tony DiNozzo, and then we got McGee, the Gibbs's personal punching bag.
Who we do have to mention, which I didn't realize for a very long time until recently rewatching it, that Sean Murray is Thackeray Binks in Hocus Pocus, of all things.
Yeah, all these people have had a very unusual, just, you want to talk about casting, is like they all had a very unusual what their first role was. Like, wait, they were that guy in that commercial in that show? A totally different type of tone and mood and style. It's like, oh, and brilliant casting. I got to say it. I mean, Rocky Carroll as Leon Vance, the director of the branch, is like, yeah, he had been with Mark Harmon on Chicago Hope, so that just totally made sense how he kind of would just do that for a while. He would get someone who had been on one of those previous shows he had did with him on a brief recurring role, or in a movie with him years ago. It's like, wasn't he in a movie years ago? Oh, that's right. He was in the Freaky Friday remake with Curtis, so that's why she was briefly on there. It's just a fun, brief girlfriend, on again, off again. It is like you say, it is kind of just funny just seeing how it's kind of an office kind of drama. Like, it's just everybody has all their quirks, all their perks, all their unusual habits, and they do try to make you buy that they could be federal agents. It's a weird balance. And at the same time, you just know there's going to be just a light laugh, or where you just have a shit-eating grin just saying, yeah, they went there. They totally went there. So this was before Bones. It was kind of trying to still some of that thunder of that CSI thing. You got to have techno music, but really, really good techno music, might I add. And a lot of stylish crime solving. But instead of just the gory flashbacks or anything, it was kind of just more just still. It's like, we're not just any federal agents, we're military federal agents. You know, this is a real thing. And it's like, apparently the creator, Donald P. Pellisario, you know, creator of Magnum PI, there you go. He had decided to just kind of have a lot of just casual kind of, you have the mystery, then you have some comedy, then you have an action that ends it, and you know, and it was kind of wild how he was like involved with like the first 5 seasons, and then it's like he wasn't really digging what Mark Harmon was bringing to the show, which is kind of was just wild. I'm like, really? And Mark Harmon was like, well, he talked to CBS personally, the executives, and he's like, okay, so I don't like how Pellisario is keeping us really late. It's kind of keeping me from my personal family life. I'm a private guy. And Pellisario doesn't like how I'm playing the role. He kind of secretly wants me to get killed or step down, and someone else replaces me. So I'm going to, you know, this is grating on me. We're 5 years in this. So you can either, you know, keep one of us, you know, or I can leave, you know.
Yeah.
Who's it going to be? And so they were banking on it. So they said, Pellisario, you know, you can, you're going to get credited. You know, you're the creator. You'll get, we'll send you a paycheck each episode airing, but bye-bye. So from that point on, they really did kind of change it up a bit. He would have a bunch of other actors he had worked with and other unusual storylines. But yeah, no, I always kept up with it in some fashion. Even episodes I wasn't crazy about, I just kind of resonated with me in a weird way. And I saw, you're talking about Supernatural. Did you know that Thomas J. Wright, that's right, the TV director of Millennium and X-Files, helmed so many of these episodes? It totally makes sense when you think about it, when you're just like,
Yeah.
all those, and just those weird, I think what was weird is CSI would often kind of hint at who was going to, the whodunit in between commercial breaks. They would have that weird black and white fade with a weird sound effect that would just kind of show a frame of an upcoming scene. And so it's like, that was an interesting way of just making you just not mess with the clicker, not tune into another station real fast. Oh, and it is kind of wild how it kind of came on the heels of other shows like 24, but it didn't really play into that war on terror propaganda. It just kind of was just there to get funding. I would put it kind of like Las Vegas. You got all these beautiful people, but it's not. So you get all the people who are looking for the lowest common denominator to tune in, but it's not going to actually deliver on that kind of entertainment, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's got all these other, just weird office stuff. What really kept you going with it that just made you say, hey, you know, I can make time for this. This is just unusual.
It's a way I did fall away from it for a while. But then this was around when I had the international move. And just before that, I had 2 children. So trying to do that and trying to stay on track of everything was a little bit impossible.
I hear you. And there was a bunch of writer strikes, so that didn't help. There was a bunch of TV shows disappearing for a while. So you're like, I didn't know that came back. Good job advertising that, buddy.
There was the benefit of reruns. So that reminded me that this show existed.
Yeah, what happened? I'm really even surprised by what people made guest spots. I'm like, wait, I just saw that season. They were on that episode? Oh, wow. Okay. So there's a life for everybody on CBS.
Yeah, I fell away from it around about when Ziva left. And then when I found out Michael Weatherly was going to be leaving, I caught up quickly to be able to watch his exit. And then I stopped watching it again for a while.
No, good. It's interesting how they handled the exits.
Yeah, and then I found out Abby was leaving, so I was like, okay, I need to catch up again. And from that point, that's where I stayed back on track with it.
I hear you on that. It was funny how even the characters you didn't like, for whatever reason, you kind of liked, if that makes sense. Because you kind of understood why they were weird and everything. And it wasn't anything weird like people sleeping with one another or bullshit like that. It was more like, yeah, I've always had this tick, or I've always kind of been secluded. It's just like, okay, so that's why you kind of got a few social skills, but you can do the work. So,
you know, it was always easy viewing. It's really,
really
easy to watch. You
was.
just literally put an episode on and you work out the case along with them, and usually you figured out who it is based on who the guest star is. Have you ever noticed that you know exactly who the
That's
murderer
a
is going to
good
be
point.
because it's the guest star?
The guest star helps. That they would really heavily promote those too, and it was just like, wait, so and so is still alive, is guesting on this. And you want to talk about interesting casting? I mean, Ziva's dad is played by Michael
Yeah.
Nori from Flashdance and The Hidden fame. Okay, interesting.
But it's just like, I saw this person play a murderer on this show, so he must be a murderer on NCIS now because he's been typecast as a murderer.
Totally. And my mother and one of my other aunts, Aunt Leah, who, they would always try and see what their mother, my grandmother, was watching. And so they would try and get to NCIS on occasion. My aunt doesn't like anything that involves autopsies. She made an exception to a few, like Longmire or what have you, but she prefers more just kind of British and period piece kind of stuff. So it's like, okay, you be you. But we can't watch Lord of the Rings every night, so we're gonna probably watch something like NCIS or just something else that's lighter or occasionally intense, but not, totally gruesome or too over the top for your taste. And my mother was just kind of liking it, but just kind of would have a few questions because she wasn't a religious viewer. So it'd be fun. What really caught their eye was David McCallum of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. fame.
Yes.
Playing Ducky, the main lab scientist. And she, other than seeing a few graphic autopsies, it was interesting how they would find kind of some of the humor and utter wit kind of interesting, and yet at the same time kind of unsettling. Just like they make these jokes every day while they're at the lab. Gross. But yeah, it is interesting how people who don't like it will still watch it. It seems just because they want to understand what makes it tick. And I guess naysayers get it, and the ones who just never gave anything a chance just never bothered with it. So it is what it is. It is kind of funny how they never had anything to do with Los Angeles. It's like, I don't know if it was Mark Harmon didn't want to do it, but CBS did. So I think that's just it. He's like, okay, you guys can do your thing. All the other supporting cast members can guest on there. I don't want anything to do with it. It was kind of an unwritten thing I heard. And I kind of got that just because when I saw LA, it always took me out of it because it kind of became my TJ Hooker, my Baywatch, where I'm just guffawing, Walker Texas Ranger, where I'm just guffawing at the fake looking explosions and CGI shootouts and very atrocious acting. And sometimes the people who are good actors give bad performances. So it would just be filmed very weird. And I got to season 10, just having that shit on in the background. You can chug through those quickly. And I was just like, done. You can keep renewing it. They almost didn't even renew it this year. And I'm just like,
yeah.
I don't need to see any more of this junk food. It's not even entertaining junk food. It's just stupid. It's in season 13 as we speak, and I don't get it at all. Who is
It's got
watching?
a very different tone.
I really don't get it.
I don't. So even though the ratings are okay for a Sunday night, but I don't see it being renewed. I have a feeling they renewed it for season 13 purely to get it to 200 episodes. I think it's 200
I think that's true.
by the end of this season.
Because people don't realize so many shows with syndication orders, it was 2 to 3 years and you were good. You were set for life, got all that.
Yeah,
But
it used to be 100 episodes for syndication. Now it's something like 88. They'll
So
syndicate
there you
at
go.
88 episodes, so you don't need it on for that long anymore.
And yeah, it gets tricky because they want to share some ratings with the right people. If if the show's still on, they want that to also serve into the ratings and what have you. They want to remind people to catch up and watch it. And at the same time, it is kind of funny how half the time it's required that you get to a 4th season, and some shows just run out of steam. They just can't make it that long.
Yeah.
It's only good for a few years, but they had all these commitments and everything. So it is kind of wild how just someone just screws up the scheduling, or the audience just isn't there. They're just not digging it. It's too slow for networks. And so they tune out. But I really don't know who was watching LA. I was just see so many people say it's good for a shootout, but it's pretty brain dead in logic. And I mean, it went for so many bosses. They had like Linda Hunt of all people be the main gal in charge of the whole thing, while Robin, from Batman, Chris O'Donnell, and LL Cool J solve crimes. And now it's like gone for like 3 other head chiefs. And I think my issue with them is they're all good actors, but for whatever reason, they must just shoot really fast on that. Because it's just like, I just don't get a vibe that they're either that or they're just catering to a very mindless kind of popcorn, kind of junk food kind of feel.
It does have more of an action movie feel to it, and maybe
but like
that's
a Fast and Furious kind of feel.
Like, yeah, maybe that's to do with Chris O'Donnell and LL Cool J being the lead stars. Have they pushed it into a direction of being more action rather than the crime solving that NCIS is known for?
Yeah, because I mean, half the time I wouldn't even remember who killed who. I was just like, okay. And they tried tying it in a few different times. They'd have Abby or Tony and even Leon be in there, but it kind of got an awkward thing, like some of the DC shows where it felt like they didn't even film it on the same soundstage. It's like, really? Jesus, you're just talking over a computer screen. How hard can it be? It just didn't match up. It didn't feel like they were in the room, it just didn't feel like they were doing enough takes. So it's an interesting, but I would call it a shit sandwich.
I kind of stick around the show purely for Kenzie. I love Kenzie. So.
Yeah, I do like Kenzie, but I don't like Deeks. Oh my God. And that's a shame too, because
he can be a bit over the top at times.
And that actor, he has been hysterical in plenty of other shows, like even Community. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know what it is about that character. If it's like when they started out, you didn't buy it really. I didn't buy it, at least. It's just like, he's too goofy even by Tony's standards to even be a federal agent. He looks way too young. And then it's like, there's times where the show just kind of, the tone of it varies, if that makes sense. Like,
well, he wasn't a federal agent. He only recently became one. He was on loan from the LAPD.
That's what was weird too. And so it's but he wasn't even acting like a cop. I was just like, is he just a guy they randomly gave a gun? Because I don't think the acting is bad, but the tone is definitely everywhere to where I can't take it all that seriously. So
yeah.
Turn your brain off and either have fun with the shootouts and the occasional cast, but it's pretty weird. So yeah, New Orleans, as you said before, it pretty much, it is legit filmed there, so they want you to make sure that you're reminded. And
that cancellation surprised me, and I'm still gutted by it, because out of all the 3 spin-offs that we've had, that has been my favorite one.
I definitely would say applaud it, because I mean, they went into some serious stuff, like just militias building up, hate crimes, and it was cool seeing Scott Bakula act opposite of his real life actress wife, Chelsea Field, as the lawyer, and Zoe McLaughlin, who had been on JAG. We'll get to that in a bit, guys. This is mainly NCIS. They all played off really well against each other. And speaking of Fast and Furious, Lucas Black is here, and I think he really got to grow as an actor here, because he wasn't having to play opposite of just, random, cars exploding and everything. He had done a few other war movies and Western brief roles, but here, I mean, he got to really make use of that Southern twang. And I mean, CCH Pounder is always a joy too. She's always been in very, people might know her from stuff like The Shield or ER, but I mean, whenever I saw her in a movie, she was just so authoritative. And so when I saw her on here, it's like, this is her, I don't think of her as a black version of Ducky or anything. No, nothing that quirky.
No, she is her own character. She She stands
Yeah.
out for all her own reasons.
And she's not even the stereotypical, wise elderly black woman. She is more of a everyone's godmother
Yeah.
kind of, is like. And I mean, Bakula, let's face it, so here's the connection. Belisario created Quantum Leap. Makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah.
So he and Mark Harmon, I don't know if they just worked from afar, but yeah, Mark Harmon wanted a proper NCIS spinoff that they could do crossovers with. So he developed it with the head writer at that time, Gary Glassberg, who wrote for the show for a while and then died of a heart attack, so tragically young, at age like 52 or something. So, but either way, whoever's currently writing it now has a lot of the same whole deal. Start off pretty intense, like with 5-parters, not just 2 or 3-parters. Do a 5-part timeline, then settle down a bit, have a few standalone things, and still learn something new about someone, and then get back to doing like a 2-parter finale that ends epically. But yeah, it's like, so Mark Harmon, just wanted to do a show, and he even appears as the Gibbs character to basically kind of pass the torch, if you will, to Lieutenant Pride, and it was interesting how, it's like you really get a better feel of just where these Navy bases are located and such. And they do kind of a mixture of everything, like people who have killed someone's identity, who have been undercover and, infiltrate various deals. So I will say the crimes are they might stand out a little more, even more than some of the other shows, because they're talking about all kinds of just real life issues, and instead of resorting to just easy stuff like Russian traffickers or online internet stuff, like we're talking more just international theft and just other kinds of corruption that are not easy to solve. And I do like how they have an interesting recurring thing where they have Steven Weber from Wings as a politician who Pride knows is crooked, but he can't ever prove, and he has to continually pretend to be loyal to while finding some dirt on him and set the record straight. And I mean, it's also interesting how they brought Diane Neal, who you guys might know from Law and Order as Attorney Casey. She's playing Abigail, this Coast Guard investigative agent on both NCIS and New Orleans. So it was interesting how they kind of expanded on her storyline. They had to just have the character vanish after a while because apparently Diane Neal, the actress, was not enjoying the long shoot schedules. So tough shit. I really dug how, like before we got started, how the Chicago PD fire and med stuff often will have, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, for syndication purposes, have kind of a half and half. If you don't see the next part, you at least got a full story somewhat that's satisfying. And that they're getting brought to justice. You might not, even if you don't see the next part where they're brought to justice. And it would be interesting how NCIS would have like a standalone case and then start up a whole different case that would require them, someone's fleeing a state, Virginia, and going to New Orleans. So there you go. Perfect way to have a meet up and take the guys down together. But I really dug it compared to some of those other CSI type shows and other ones that could get cliche at times, because like they would actually kind of have it be a little more strategic instead of just, hey, we're all going to goof around and not get anything done, and now we're going to just so happen to catch the bad guy in 2 days.
I like the writing seemed, I don't want to say smarter, but more intricate maybe. It was, rather than one, a case fit in one episode, it was that whole thing of, well, we'll run it into 2 episodes if we need to, or we'll have one storyline, like, Pride with the man in the red suit. He turned up at the start of, what was it, season 6? And then he kept popping up at random points throughout the season, and it
sometimes
was
to have a very
continued storyline that
sometimes to have a personal conversation.
And it didn't wrap up until towards the end. of the full season, but you knew you kept getting this reminder that there was this man in the red suit and he meant something to Pride, and we had to figure out Pride had to figure out what he meant to him.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it wasn't the storyline you were actually expecting by the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah, you weren't expecting any of it. Like we had heard word that they were working on another spinoff, but we didn't know how serious it was because, little known fact, they did work on an NCIS spinoff for LA that was called Red.
Yeah.
I forgot what that stands for. It's not related to the Bruce Willis movie, but it had Kim Raver. You might know her from Third Watch and 24, and John Corbett, and they had been on a few episodes on LA, and they were going to have their characters get their own spinoff, but it didn't take off. The pilot tested poorly. So when they were announcing, by the time New Orleans came around and, Bakula's being a special guest star, it was kind of just, it may happen, it may not. And then it happens and you're like, whoa, okay. And like you say, it just kind of happened more naturally. Like there would be times where they would guest on each other's shows, but it wasn't to help on a mission for an easy ratings grab. It was more of it was like, I need a personal favor. Can you do this for me? Can you look in the dirt on this politician or something like that, And who do you recommend join my team? Yada, yada. So it's like, okay, cool. And it's like, so you guys are both acknowledging each other while LA goes on in the background and isn't even on the same nights. It was weird. It's like LA would often be on like a Sunday while the main NCIS in New Orleans were often on the same night, like on a Monday or a Wednesday. I'm like, okay, interesting.
Yeah, I think that's what killed New Orleans when it moved from the Tuesday to the Sunday. And I get why it moved from the Tuesday, because FBI Most Wanted needed to run after FBI to benefit from the FBI traffic.
Wild. Yeah.
But I think that's the point where it struggled, because that Sunday night time slot is hard going up against the football.
Going up against the football, and even though it's an action show, like I say, it's also a mystery and a drama. And unfortunately, the sports crowd really just wants action or nothing at all, or comedy. They don't.
Which is
really
why
think.
The Equalizer works so well for that time slot.
Oh yeah, it seems like NBC doesn't have it down yet, but CBS and Fox have had it down for quite a while. Like after Super Bowls, I can't tell you how many times Fox would air premiere of Bones or 24 immediately following that. It's like, okay, even if you're not following the story, I know you're going to tune in because you liked how that explosion or that one-liner was said in that trailer. You're going to laugh, or you're going to go, holy shit, that's cool. It's something. That's a good point. I do think it seemed like it was always on the verge of being canceled. And then I don't know who took over for Gary Glassberg. I couldn't find any of that, but apparently the writing staff knew what was making it tick. So it kept going on. And so, yeah, New Orleans, God, I can't believe it. It was on for 7 seasons, which I think is a good way to go. And I just dug it in general, just how far Scott Bakula had come as a TV actor, People are forgetting nowadays it's kind of commonplace to have just people go from TV to movies, but it didn't used to be that way. Bakula was from the day and age where you were either the TV guy or the movie guy. And, he's up against people like Tom Selleck and Richard Dean Anderson. And, he had Quantum Leap, and then he had Star Trek. And in between, he would have small movie parts or TV movies, but, or shows that didn't last all that long. But yeah, he hadn't really been doing as much. He had a short-lived show called Men of a Certain Age, and he had been the father of the main character on Chuck, which I thought was a brilliant casting choice that added to the comedic appeal. And they worked in a few references to his 80s type hairdo, which was funny. But yeah, it was like on this, it was just so fun because it's like, you just really see him getting into that accent. I mean, you gotta like a guy named Agent Dwayne Pride, who they nicknamed King.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of interesting, because he was born in Missouri, and so he has some of that similar kind of speaking dialect. So it was I think he really dug into the role, and you can see he likes to tell important dramatic stories once in a while, as opposed to just be the small screen Harrison Ford equivalent. He really does like to do something like that. And building on your point on how it would run coherent with NCIS, when Rocky Carroll appeared as the Leon Vance character, it felt way more impactful, in my opinion. Because like you would see him appear on LA and it just felt like he had just done his reading in one take or just talked to the cameraman. It was like there you actually saw him being way more intense and vocal, and it wasn't just the material. He was actually kind of just saying simple lines, but kind of with more it just felt more honest. So, and it helped also that they had Fornell, the federal agent, plays, and as well as some of the newer agents on there. But yeah, no, I think I'll bring this a little back. So as the NCIS went on, it kind of became who is going to try and kill Gibbs, this season, I think.
Yeah.
First, it's the cartel guys who want vengeance for him killing the guy who killed his family. He was their brother. It's always this angry sister. And so that's where it kind of lost me after a while. It definitely lost my sister there, but I kept with it. And season 9 just blew me out of the water because I think they had struggled either during the writer's strike or just with getting too cliche. And they just realized they had to get away from the Ziva and Tony's whole will they or won't they, and then also have something change for Gibbs, because you can't keep having him be grumpy and get over his injuries. You got to have a little something else. And I knew many people had always kind of just lost track of it after a while, just because, people came and left. Like, I know some people didn't like the previous NCIS director, Jenny Shepard, Lauren Holly's character. I was kind of indifferent, but I will say some of her storyline was a little hard to follow. I personally missed Caitlin Todd, played by, Sasha.
Yeah, I loved Kate.
Just never the same. Like, even Denoza, you can tell, being the perv he is, he still thinks about her. It was like, but you can tell that changed him. Like, her death is when he actually starts taking his job seriously. That's the ironic part.
Yeah.
He never took his job seriously, and yet somehow he was enough of a smartass to just get by. Oh, man. Yeah, no, I mean, so much like you, I had personal stuff going on and everything, so it took me a while to actually get back to binge watching it. Fortunately, there was this thing called Paramount Plus, so I had someone's back when it first launched, it was under a different name, CBS All Access, but I used a friend's account and I literally just binge watched all the seasons I hadn't yet seen and then recorded the rest. And I still have cable, sue me. And it was funny how, like you say, we heard that, Michael Wetterly was kind of a little naughty behind the scenes, and he was playing, had his own lawyer comedy show going on. But I just, when the moment I heard that they still acknowledged him in the show and there were some other cool guest stars, I already knew I wanted to come back. Maria Bello from ER fame had joined the show. I loved her as a movie actress and history of violence and everything. So I'm like, okay. She's both a psychologist and a special agent. That's a cool hook. That we need to kind of get underneath these guys' skins a little more. And they had all these new agents who I was hearing good things about. So I'm like, okay, cool. They're not just casting pretty faces. This isn't a show that's going downhill and people are somehow still watching. But yeah, no, I went when they announced Ziva was coming back, I'm like, okay, I have no excuse to not be back to this. I need to finish this. So it's like they announced her in season 16, and then season 17 is all, get rid of the people who are terrorizing her family, where she's hiding out now, when she has to kind of step down and do her own international spy stuff. So I was like, okay, cool. So she had to avenge the death of her dad, who was controversial in Israel and everything. But it was cool having that international kind of Taken Commando kind of thing to it. They even mentioned Valverde, which is the fictional South American country from Commando, in one episode. I'm like, oh wow. And I mean, wait, you got Wilmer Valderrama, the Ricky guy from that 70s show as Torres? Okay, yeah. And it's so funny. I would even say this to family members, and they would keep forgetting because he just looks so different. They're like, he sounds like the guy from that 70s show. I'm like, yeah, it's because he is.
I was really glad that they developed his character quickly, because I thought he was just going to be, you know, another dinosaur.
They weren't even sure if he'd return in that cliffhanger. And it was like, wow, okay, nice.
Yeah, and I was just really glad that they've added a lot of depth to his character very quickly.
I agree. I was really impressed. And at first it seemed like him and Emily Wickershaw's character, Bishop, were going to become the next, you know, Ziva and Tony, but they quickly, you know, they brushed it aside, and the producers kept saying, please keep watching. There's a surprise in store. And sure enough, I'm like, wow, Bishop was an NSA plant this whole time. And I'm like, damn, that broke my heart.
I think they do pull on the will they want their storylines a bit too much, and then there's never the you know, the big outcome, you know, the good outcome. It's like Tony and Ziva, by the time they get together, Ziva's off. Gibbs and Jack, by the time that one's over, Jack's off. By the time they wrap up the Torres and Bishop, will they, won't they, Bishop's off. And it's like each time they do this, the women just leave.
They get bored. It had already broken my heart because Sloane, it made sense. She had a personal mission and was helping people in the Middle East, you know, reclaim their stolen kids and everything, and had taken down the war criminal who had imprisoned her. So it was like, she was kind of much like the Caitlin Todd if Caitlin had a, you know, tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it was so funny, you know, all these other actors who had started off on this show had all these other successful shows. So yeah, Weatherly's on Bull, and Sasha Alexander was finishing up Rosalie and Isles, and I'm like, I keep reminding myself, I better go back and actually finish NCIS. But it was kind of funny how, yeah, it's like Bishop had just become emotionally attached, which was against her assignment with Torres and everybody. And so as a result, you know, pulling him into this whole scandal, and she's having to step down. And you're like, damn.
Yeah.
But no, so I guess that brings us to the new current agents. Agent Knight, played by Katrina Law, who you guys might know from Spartacus and Arrow. That was a hell of a casting, because it's like they introduced him in the finale, and it's like, okay, so I'm expecting them to return, and sure enough, she's returning.
So my only like sort of nitpick at this is Katrina Law was in the final season of Hawaii Five-0. And we know Hawaii Five-0 and NCIS are in the same universe.
Yeah, it gets
Why
very
could they not have
complicated.
just kept that character, you know, just brought the same character that we'd already come to know?
You're going to hate me. I don't remember any of the characters on Hawaii Five-0. I say that as a fan. Hawaii Five-0 has excellent stunts and action. You will go, holy shit, and want to rewind it. It is that kind of Jackie Chan meets just brutal NYPD Blue type action that you can ask for. It is crazy, just well done martial arts and explosions. Like, there's never been a Lethal Weapon movie that absurd that keeps you on your toes saying, this is so dumb, and yet I want more. I must have more. I need more. This is like steroids. It's a steroid-inducing show. And I'm just like, okay. But yeah, it's like almost everybody in all these other NCIS shows has played different characters. So yeah, it's confusing. So tell me, if you will, what character did she play? Because I don't remember it at all. And I know she was in like 10 of those episodes.
Yeah, she was only in the last season.
And she was like a villain or a girlfriend?
No, she joined she joined the team right at the end.
Okay, so I'm remembering. All I remembered mainly So I think that's a
I'm
good
trying to
segue.
remember. I want to say Quinn. I want to say Quinn was a name.
I think
I'm
so.
trying to remember.
It might be. But she was interesting. I've always found her interesting as an actress just because she's appeared in just unusual movies. She's like let me see. She's part Taiwan, part German and Italian. Okay. Very interesting. So she kind of is one of those actors. If she says whatever ethnicity she is, you're going to kind of buy it because she just, she's mixed. And I'd seen her in some silly, cheesy B movies, as well as just other guest spot appearances. And fun fact, she's actually technically part of the 24 universe. She starred in one of those web series spinoffs. Yeah, I'd seen her guest star on shows like Chuck. She was on that Training Day continuation show.
Yeah.
She's been in all kinds of movies and shows. And so it's like, okay, so I dig her. And I've seen her in interviews, so I know she has a sense of humor. So when I saw that she had kind of dry, just smart ass kind of, but still reserved kind of mash up with her character, I was like, I get it. I totally get it. But yeah, no, I do agree. It did seem like after a while that just whoever's on CBS, just put them on the other show that comes on right after it. So it seemed like it was very questionable casting at first, but
I mean, the character was introduced well. I feared, which, a lot of TV shows, when it comes to female
they gotta
characters,
push
they
it.
try to, they try and push it, or they make them into this standoffish, person that you can't really get a personality from, and you just see them as being difficult. And I thought with what they've done with her storyline initially, that she was this terrorist negotiator who had lost her whole team, I thought they were going to make her into this person who was just going to argue with Taurus and McGee the whole time.
That's
and
so
then,
true. Had it
and
gone
then
that way,
she softened up very quickly, and they made a gel with the team really quickly. I was like, okay, you've written her in well. You've done this right.
No, so true. Because like, whether it's planned or not for a long time, there are plenty of times where it just seems like people don't actually see how it tests, or they're just afraid because they just think, I'm a great writer, it can't ever go wrong. And it's like, no, you really got to think this out a bit.
Yeah.
It does seem like they will try to push a character on everyone instead of actually see if it works. And don't get me wrong, Hawaii Five-0 got even more confusing because they had plenty of people from LA in recurring roles on there, and I'm like, they're not playing the same character, even though they did a crazy LA and Hawaii. So I think that's a good switch. So when I saw 5-0, my mother would roll her eyes each time I had it on. My sister would be like, this is okay, but it's kind of cheesy. And I'm like, oh, it's total cheese. But oh man, that action. That action. There's just some stuff where it's like, it doesn't matter what goes on screen. This is just an exciting show, and I like all the 4 leads. And even though you want to talk casting, basically everybody from Battlestar Galactica, 24, and Lost is on this show. And that's actually where Peter Linkoff got his start. He was like one of the writers and producers on 24 and CSI New York. So there you go. And basically anyone he had worked with would be a featured villain of the week. And Linkoff started just using a lot of those same guys to be the crew and stunt people on his other shows, Hawaii Five-0 and not Hawaii, on the new Magnum PI and MacGyver. So before we get back to Hawaii Five-0, have you seen any of those crazy spinoffs?
I haven't. I catch an episode here and there if it is the only thing airing new.
They basically don't have anything to do with each other except MacGyver and Magnum did a crossover with that, and then some character from Scorpion briefly appeared on there, and then other background characters appeared on there because they're all filmed in Hawaii. Newsflash. But
yeah, I mean, I know Hawaii Five-0 and Magnum PI have recently, like they did a crossover.
Yeah, that was
in Hawaii Five-0's last season.
To get it more ratings, they're just like, just have the new Magnum just solve crimes with these guys, and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, there was a huge continuity error within that, because wasn't there a previous episode of Hawaii Five-0 where they sang the old Magnum PI theme tune?
Mm-hmm. Just like Detective Munch is on all these other Law and Order shows, and yet makes an X-Files reference, and then he appears on the X-Files. So yeah, yeah, it don't work unless you just turn your brain off. I know what you mean. It was kind of weird, and it was also kind of wild how for a while it seemed like they just wanted to get anyone who could be like a season-long comic book kind of villain. So first you got Mark Dacascos, that's right, who's later in John Wick Free and all these other weird shows and martial arts in real life. And then you got William Baldwin. Some Baldwin's gonna be on here. And then yeah, it's like they occasionally had like just some other people just from other movies and shows, but it was just also just kind of weird how I guess you could say how basically they're all doing their own thing, but sometimes it would be just kind of a spot the D-lister or spot the B-movie actor who had a popular 90s, bunch of kung fu movies or 90s shows. So it did kind of become that for me after a while, where I'm like, wait, so that was so-and-so? Oh, wow, okay. Time has not been kind to them, but hey, they're having a fun cameo being the bad guy or the guy who gets killed at the beginning of the episode, or the old retired uncle. And then it gets even more surreal when it connects to the actual Hawaii Five-0, like so-and-so is related to an actual like Jack Lord type character from one of those earlier episodes. So I was like, well, I didn't expect him to go there, so technically it's a sequel to the original Hawaii Five-0. Okay, cool, I'll buy it. Now let me read off just random people who have been on the show. Sean Puff Daddy Combs, George Takei, Treat Williams, I'm Peter Weller, Jeff Fahey, James Caan, that's right, gotta have your dad on here. Robert Loggia, who, fun fact, played like 3 different characters on the original Hawaii Five-0, and Kevin Sorbo, yep, gotta have a Christian Scientist, and then James Remar, Tom Berenger, I don't even remember that episode, Bai Ling, Chuck Norris, I don't remember that. How do I not remember or recall that? Okay, whatever. Musician Jimmy Buffett, I definitely recall that. There's plenty of other people who aren't listed there who I could definitely list off. Cloris Leachman, Michael Madsen, Tim Daly. They had all kinds of interesting cast members where you're like, interesting. No. So I guess you could call it a very lowbrow show, but kind of the best kind of fun show.
I stopped watching when Daniel Day Kim and Grace Park left.
I did initially too. I was like, you bastards. Because
Yeah.
the reason for it was already bad enough where CBS didn't view them as the leads. I'm like, they're on every poster. They are totally the leads. And I had other minority pals who were just like, well, maybe not really. I'm like, no, bullshit. They're in the first scene of the pilot. They're the main character. And I'm sorry, but she has a name. Grace Park has done great work as an actress. I mean, she was Boomer on Battlestar Galactica, and then she goes and does this, and now she's on A Million Little Things. But it's like, she's a very interesting dramatic actress. And, Daniel Day Kim, who hates him? He's just a fun actor who's gotten recently into producing lately. But, I mean, yeah, it's just like, was always reliable. And, I mean, not to knock all the other actors, but, Chi McBride, you probably know him from Boston Public and House,
Yeah.
but he was kind of carrying the show a bit too, but they never really featured him prominently in the posters until like when he was introduced, and was like, well, then give him a pay raise at least. But yeah, it's like, to add insult to injury, like you have it, that announcement, and you're like, not digging that. That's both those actors I really liked, and they were what draw me in. I didn't know who the hell Alex O'Loughlin or Scott Conn were. I
Well,
did, but
that's
I
the thing.
didn't.
It was Daniel Day-Kim that pulled me in because I was a Lost fan. So I started watching that for him. And
There you go. Yeah, exactly. And so it's like Scott Conn, he's James Caan's son, but other than Ocean's 11, I didn't know who he was. I knew he was a jerk in real life with paparazzi, but I didn't know who he was. And Alex O'Loughlin, he had been on some other shows like Moonlight and lame dating comedies, but the most developed I ever saw as an actor was that actually lasted more than a season is he was on a few seasons of The Shield as one of their promiscuous guys. So it was like he was always basically playing just the eye candy. So it's like, okay, whatever. He's got the physique, but that's kind of what he is. They need someone who can make the gals tune in. I get it. And the guys will ask him to be their workout partner. I get it. But yeah, it's like I didn't know who those guys were. I knew who, like you said, Kim was. He was good on Lost in 24, and Grace Park was good on Battlestar. So it was like one and done. And of course, the explosions and the other recurring cast members caught my name. So it was like, okay, this is going to be fun. And sure enough, it was like, it's fun. But yeah, to add insult to injury, they didn't even give you a proper reason for why they left. Just not.
yeah.
It was like, I saw the episode twice and I still don't know why they left. So why did they leave? I don't know.
I don't think anyone can tell you that.
No. And they could have at least tried. But
this is what annoys me with TV and writers when it comes to actors leaving, that when the writers don't want the actors to leave, or when actors leave on bad terms for very good reasons, and then the writers will just turn around going, oh no, we're just gonna give them a really bad exit as an FU to leaving.
Right. I'll film them with their unconvincing stunt double or stand-in, or I'll just film an explosion just because that's as good as we got. And the worst thing you can do is make the editor have virtually nothing to do that could make it transition better,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, then after a while, it kind of became apparent that Peter Linkov had to step down because he apparently had a temper tantrum and was being very overworked. I knew a friend who knows him who's worked with him on a few different movies, and he's actually working on his next movie with him. Said that he was basically getting overworked. And I'm fortunate to have that connection, but at the same time, I do get it. I don't think he's a bad person, but his comments that he made to the MacGyver actor that you should lose some weight, is like, Jesus, dude.
Mhm.
And some of the production's assistants saying there were several miscommunications because half the time he would just shout over the phone. It was like, you gotta chill. I have a boss who clearly does a lot of weed. We've seen his fingers. He does a lot of weed. And snorts coke, something. He's doing something that makes him high as a kite some days. And so it's like, you got to get that shit under control, Oh, so yeah, no, I totally agree. It just needed a little something more to just kind of just make up for that, because I'm not going to blame, all the other actors they introduced later on. Like, I actually dig Megan Roth. She's an actress who's been in a bunch of things. Like, she was on Being Human, but what was this? Oh, that's right. Yeah, she was on what's it called? Rogue and Kingdom. These two direct TV shows that were pretty good. But yeah, it's like, okay, nothing against her, but again, you guys could have given an exit to characters we've grown to love. So I didn't think the writing was strong in this show, but I ended up kind of still. I think the actors they gelled. It was kind of a Miami Vice thing where whenever a writer's misstepped, it was made up for in that, again, you dug all the rest of the cast. They really did legit love each other. I never heard anything about anyone saying, I can't stand that asshole, I'm going away. And that's good, because you're in Hawaii, so I hope you guys get along with each other. You know, it's gonna be a long year. But yeah, no, I mean, lasted 10 years, and man, oh man, it. I can say the final seasons are worth watching, but if you don't like a certain storyline, just keep watching it. You'll find one that is exciting.
I did end up watching the final season purely because, so TV Line had done a blind item of, there's going to be a lead character that leaves a show and it's a long running show. Can you guess which show it is? Now, they never actually confirmed which show it was, but they got to the point where they said, actually, the lead character is now going to stay because this season is going to be the last season. And I'd already narrowed things down to, it was either going to be NCIS, Blue Bloods, or Hawaii Five-0. That's what I'd narrowed.
Which was so weird.
My options down.
I thought Blue Bloods had ended, and then lo and behold, it's canceled, but it's just been renewed. So it's like, well, I don't see what you can do anymore past season 10. Not bad, but it's just comfort food. It's not something that makes you go, I really got to see every episode. I dig it.
Yeah, but so, they did this, and I narrowed it down to the 3. So I was like, okay, I'm going to watch all 3 for a season just to see which one ends and to see if I got it right. And then suddenly they announced partway through Hawaii Five-0 season 10 that this was going to be the last one, and everyone was complaining that it was going to be cancelled. And it's like, this show's not been cancelled. This show was chosen to end at this point. And I knew it was one of the 3s.
One of those 3, yep. Gotta go. So, get this. Did you know this? Magnum PI is produced through John Davis. Why does he sound familiar? He's the producer of hit movies like Shaft and iRobot and the Predator films. But yeah, it's produced through Universal with CBS. And meanwhile, MacGyver is produced through Lionsgate. So I guess maybe it's because they got the rights to the original show. I think that was in Lions Atlantis production, so that makes better sense. But I did not know that. I thought it was all Paramount all the time, so there you go. Someone's got to share those DVD and Blu-ray sales. Somebody. So I will admit, I have casually followed the new MacGyver, and I gave enough time to Magnum PI. It seems like everyone varies on all of these 2 particular ones. Like, everyone basically accepted Hawaii as just simple, just giant explosions. I think it was just because, in my opinion, it just did it better than Los Angeles. It was more inviting. It wasn't completely mindless, but it was just over the top and just fun. And it's like, with these 2, it kind of just depended on, it's like they both took a while to get comfortable being what they were. It's like, okay, obviously we can't be your dad or your uncle's, Magnum or MacGyver, but we're going to create our own storylines and do our own thing. So I never followed MacGyver closely, but I did have fun with a lot of the espionage, and it helped that George Ziods, Stokes, the Texan guy from CSI, was like the co-lead. So I'm like, okay, well, at least you got that. I don't know who the rest of these people are. I'll let you weigh in.
I've watched like the odd episode here and there.
And once again, they have a lot of people from Hawaii Five-0 playing different people and recurring ones. I'm like, okay, so William Baldwin is on this as the dad of one of the characters. And I'm like, okay, but he just played the bad guy on Hawaii, so I'm confused. But okay. I'm with you, though. It's pretty much what it's best used as, is casual stuff. I've seen a lot of people who, they kind of imply that he's actually the son of the legit MacGyver, but I don't know if they could legally make direct use of it. they asked Richard Dean Anderson to reprise the role, but he was totally against it because he did MacGyver as kind of an FU to like the NRA. He's like, I want to just show that we can do a fun James Bond or Indiana Jones kind of show without having to be just, you know, the character must brutally kill somebody or anything. Just a fun, just Saturday morning live action cartoon. That's what he wanted to do. And it can be a family show because I'm doing this with the Fonz. You know, Henry Winkler's my producer. And it was like, I can see where he's coming from. At the same time, I mean, I think he knows. I hope he knows. I know many people now that, you know, standards have changed. And I mean, in many ways, this show isn't gruesome or anything. It still could easily be a light PG-13. It's just, it's going by the same trend, but I think because it's still a little slightly different in terms of, you know, no one asked for continuation / reboot. You know, it had so much working against it. I will say I dig the cast. They have Meredith Eden, that short actress who's
Boston Legal.
Yes, someone did their homework. That's a great. She was awesome on that, and you know, she was briefly on NCIS as a different character, but I mean, just so many other just hysterical, just guest spots, and you know, she'd been inspirational just as a person, you know, just and as an actress, you know, just she could do drama, she could do comedy, and you know, just have her be the boss. This is where I just realized, you know, this is a fun equal opportunity show, and it's also just kind of cool to just see that I think in a way it does kind of have the same motif as the original show. Now bear with me, guys. I'm not saying it's entirely at all like the original show. What I'm saying is, before you stone me to death, is what I'm saying is that essentially it's showing heroes literally do have different skill sets and everything. Like, now, yes, the character does resort to gunplay, but at the same time, it's not because he wants to. It's just because that's just the last resort. He'll use a bunch of devices and explosions that'll knock someone out. But I think you got to remember, regardless of how you remember the show, MacGyver killed plenty of people by accident. And it was always just the last straw, or somewhat he finally was able to get a tranquilizer or a blow dart or some shit. But what I am getting at is that basically, yes, there are plenty of other characters who would use guns on the show and sometimes kill someone, but it was pretty minuscule still even then. And I think that's just it. Because it was a lot of overdose on here, and it's still part of the Hawaii Five-0 new Magnum universe, it did go there. It did have that whole deal where they decided, okay, let's just have, you know, whatever happens. So this episode, we're going to be creative and just, we knock the guy out and then hack the computer server that stops the nukes from detonating, all that bullshit. But then, yeah, the next episode, Iad's character, he is going to set off a bunch of explosions that kill like 200 henchmen or something. Can't help it. It's an action show. But I get it. It is somewhat different. And at the same time, I mean, you were talking Equalizer. I'm really surprised they haven't crossed over with that. They might as well. It's on at the same nights. Some nights. So I casually enjoy it. It's not something that I would say, oh, top 10, 100, you know. It's like, I've just casually watched it every year it's been on. I didn't realize how many people were on it. But here's the thing. Generally, if I like what I see, I generally always do. So I'm just putting it out there. I had fun seeing some of the guest spots and everything. I did find some of the casting questionable, but I mean, it is a fun show after all. And while it's not something you really take at face value, it is still fun escapism. So it's kind of one of those where the popcorn just won out on this one. I just couldn't help it. But there were some other interesting guest spots. So yeah, since you're familiar with Magnum, I think that's enough spent on we're already going to do an episode separately on the original MacGyver, so let's just head to Magnum PI rehash. So it's got nothing to do with the original, and I think that's both a smart move, and it's also kind of why it had a lot working against it. See, this isn't why I had any issue with it. I had no issue at all. I judge everything as its own entity. I do not go by what early screenings or test screenings show, because you don't know until you know. You got to actually watch it, you know? And so I had no issue with the cast. I was already a fan of Jay Hernandez. He'd just been on just so many movies and shows like Friday Night Lights. You might know him from those Hostel horror films. Always found a reliable character actor.
He was in a few episodes of The Expanse, I believe, first season.
Yes. He's the police partner who gets injured. He's pretty good, but I guess this conflicted with this, so he was on here. Actually, no, that was like 4 years before. I don't know why he's on here versus that, but yeah, no. So yeah, no, I understood why they casted him as this. Zachary Nyden, you might know from Happy Endings and Flash Forward and a bunch of other shows. He's often comic relief and everything, so I wasn't surprised at all to see him on here. Who was the other guy? Tim Kang. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. I know him. The Korean actor. Okay, yeah, he's from The Mentalist, so that makes sense why he's on here. He was in Rambo 4. Action cred. I don't know Perdita Weeks, the British actress who plays Juliet, but so, oh, that's right. My bad. She was Mary Boleyn in The Tudors. That's right. So, yeah.
Was she?
Yes. Not kidding. I just read it. Learn something every day. So I'd seen her in Ready Player One and As Above, So Below. So she was in the typical action horror blockbuster movies and a few miniseries. So, okay, interesting. So I found the MI6 and other spy stuff pretty interesting, but I also found it kind of messy when it kind of, because then you get into all this other stuff where they're doing crossovers with Hawaii Five-0, and then they're doing all this other just, he's trying to figure out his troubled past. And I'm like, so is this a comedy or an action show? It's whatever. It's popcorn, but still, it was kind of messy. But I can understand. I get it. It did have, it had a slightly better cast in the supporting of it. So who knows? It seems to have gotten better. So I will check out season 2, and it's already in season 3. So I guess I better just set my DVR and just suck it up and just see. Oh, I take it back. It's in season 4 now. So maybe I should give it another chance. But I wasn't terribly impressed, which was a shame because I really dug the action, but I really did not like the story at all.
I think it is working well in its Friday night slot now. And it seems weird to say that, you know, that the Friday night, what used to be the death slot, has now become this really good night for...
It really is weird.
CBS has done really well with its Friday night.
I don't know how.
Blue Bloods and, you know, now Magnum PI. Even SWAT is doing so much better.
Yeah, because Friday night. Yeah, it used to be ignored. And I used to... It was second nature to me because I would... you know, come home from school and watch Stargate and Battlestar with my folks and uncle, but, you know, it was Sci-Fi Friday, you know?
Yeah.
But it was just weird how, yeah, if it wasn't cable TV, everyone else is like, well, let's just have paid programming or soap operas and other crap on Friday. And so, yeah, now Friday is basically, if you're not going to the movies, you're just going to watch some, again, explosions and cool guys wearing sunglasses.
And maybe with streaming, it's actually helped because now if you put a show on the Friday night, people are going to stream it the Saturday morning.
That too, yeah. Well, they do laundry or take the kids out to the zoo, and yeah. So, I think I just also need to just tune my expectations. I just generally just, I just wasn't all that impressed, but I also know that as we're seeing with shows that we've been revisiting this year or even years later, some stuff just evolves over time, or you were introduced to the show when it got bad versus when it was good. So, or maybe the bad is now being reevaluated as the good. So it is what it is. But I just found it a very messy storyline and felt like the actors didn't look all that comfortable in their roles, especially Hernandez. But at the same time, to his credit, it is what it is. Like, they were kind of underusing Zachary Knight, and I was kind of surprised because I would have thought he would be like front and center, and they kind of underuse his comedic ability because I know he can be over the top and very wacky from other stuff I've seen him in.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt he was kind of reserved a bit, but I guess since it's kind of improving a bit since they're kind of just deciding, hey, let's just have you again crossover with Hawaii 5-0 most of the time. But now that Hawaii's not on, I don't know if it'll continue being its entity. I just don't find the characters as interesting. In fact, I'll just say this. I don't find them interesting at all. There's plenty of weird guest spots where I was just like, wait, Bobby Lee from Mad TV? And wait, that's Corbin Burnson from LA Law and Psych? Okay. And it was so weird. When he was introduced, I thought it was just a one and done. And then next thing you know, they're bringing him back. I'm like, okay. But they had some very weird guest spots. And, well, from more of what you've seen, what do you like about it? I'm done ranting.
I don't know. It's lighthearted. There's a lot
Alright.
of lighthearted moments to it, which kind of, again, which is probably why Friday night works for it, because I don't want anything too heavy on a Friday night. I just want to be able to literally
So
put
there
something
I
on
go.
with the
I
popcorn.
gotta start watching it on Friday. Oh man. Yeah, no, I mean, because basically that's just it. This is like they want to get to the rough and dirty, and I get it too. They are trying to also get to where they can get your attention.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't got your attention, then no one tunes in. But yeah, no, I mean, so it is kind of wild how when they finally launched NCIS Hawaii, I was like, so what's going on with this? It's like, so Christopher, am I pronouncing his name the right way? Not Stabler. Is it Stickler? Let me look it up. I think it might be Stapleton, but we'll see. No, that's not it. Here's Hawaii. I just had it right here in front of me. Okay, well, anyway, so one of the head producers on New Orleans decided to be the showrunner on NCIS Hawaii. And yes, since it's filmed in Hawaii, a lot of people from Hawaii 5-0 end up showing up on there as guest spots. Vanessa Leahy had actually guest starred on that before she became the lead on this.
Mm-hmm.
I was never a fan of her music husband, but she seems like a decent actress. So yeah, no, I am liking what I'm seeing so far. It's kind of like New Orleans was in its early seasons, where it wasn't junky like LA, but it was still kind of just to the point and brutal. And kind of like Equalizer, you just kind of feel good about just seeing these guys take out the trash, as opposed to just like, oh, grim guy who's, tortured and, none of that. It's all kind of just straightforward. And much like the new MacGyver, I was just really glad at how they were able to, without being preachy, just kind of have just a very equal opportunity audience. Like they did imply one of the agents that Vanessa Felito played on New Orleans was gay, but they didn't really talk about it as much, and they just showed her relationship. And flash forward, we're here to 2021, and it's like they introduced right away that someone has had an affair with someone else, and they're kind of openly in their sexuality. It's like, okay, interesting. So that's kind of breaking the wall on NCIS necessarily has to be for kids, but at the same time, or just family or teens. But it's also interesting how they're also just showing just very unusual spy kind of stuff. Like there's always something happening beneath the surface, and it's always some kind of inside job. So it's like, interesting how you went that direction this time. Well, let's hope it's for the better, you know. I don't mind what I'm seeing right now. I feel like, again, Leahy's got it figured out. I think she knows how to make the character be very charismatic as opposed to just say her lines on time.
There are times that I'd like to see them pull back I mean, I'm only up to episode 3. I've kind of fallen away. It's all on my DVR waiting for me to catch up.
I got to episode 7.
It was just she was too forced as the leader of the team. You know, it was like, I'm the special agent in charge. And
I do
just
concur
because I'm
that
a woman doesn't mean that I'm weak, so I'm gonna pretend that I'm tougher than I really am.
Yeah, they kind of, it's weird. Like the team was all basically, they all hated each other. Like the hacker guy, the other guy who's like her second in command, and then the third gal who is often the one who solves everything, and then just as their partner to the crime scene, gun in hand. It was weird how. So I don't know if half these writers, when they start out, just smoke something or just are borderline schizophrenic. And I say that with respect because basically, I don't, but you know what I mean. Basically, it just seems like they just hit the ground running and whatever sticks, and they don't know by episode 3 who and what the character is by that point. But I will agree with you. It just seemed like their team doesn't even come together. I think what they were really trying to illustrate is this is the most unlikely team, and they were trying to go for some of that same DiNozzo and Ziva kind of stuff. But like you say, they weren't involved with the original NCIS until they're involved with the spinoff. So they're just kind of doing a copy of a copy, but at the same time, it didn't feel like, okay, so these guys are only going to act like the Hawaiian version of Tony and everything. And it was interesting seeing the third gal on there because, yeah, it's cool to see another Middle Eastern actress, you know, after New Orleans, just kind of that same kind of deal is like, I'm Middle Eastern, but for once I'm not playing a terrorist on a TV show. That's it. But at the same time, yeah, it did kind of seem like they kind of had to brush past that. And I don't know if they just decided to just kind of freeball, just whatever we make up in the first thing, we'll make up from here. But it was very comforting. I did not want to snooze away or just look at my phone when I watched an episode. And I think where it really has issues with, it's not like CSI New York where they'll have all this build up and then they'll have an ending that just feels forced or false or anticlimactic for that matter. But at the same time, they do have a lot of stuff where it's like, yeah, I don't really know who killed who either. I'm just along for the ride. But in all fairness, that's just kind of common with a lot of these shows. Like, I think it's also, I wouldn't say it's trying to differentiate itself too much. It already pretty much did that. So now it's a matter of, will the different necessarily be better? Because like when Abby left NCIS, I was never a huge fan of her, but I know she had a fan base. So I was like, well, how are they going to reel that in? And so then lo and behold, they get this comedian, Diana Renazover, I think is how you say it, but whatever, as Casey, and it's like, whoa, she's a totally different kind of comedy, and a totally different type of, you know, forensics gal. I like it, but does everyone else? And it was interesting just kind of to see that kind of contrast because like such different personas. And so yeah, just bringing this back to NCIS, I think Hawaii can be fun. And it is interesting how they're doing what they do with the FBI shows where they'll have a clip of the upcoming episode and they try to get everyone's attention that way and say, hey, if you like what you see, watch tonight and see how it happens. So smart on the advertiser. I wish they had done that years ago. But
I have liked the way Hawaii manages to show the island and how the people on the island don't necessarily trust NCIS, and then NCIS has to work the boundaries. And it's
so glad you brought that up because my aunt, who was a fan of this show, you know, lived on, you know, a Navy base of in Hawaii. And so she would always guffaw at when she saw the new Hawaii Five-0. She's like, there's not any drug trafficking anywhere dangerous like that. We go there all the time. It's fine, but fiction, guys, fiction. But yeah, no, it is kind of funny how they don't really have any criminals that are even similar to that. And I think that was just kind of the deal, is like, you're filming something in Hawaii. It's up to you if you want to make it be like Hawaii Five-0. Yeah, anyone else would have probably just laid back and just done an easy, not necessarily imaginative show that's basically was a retread. But yeah, it's like with this, they're basically trying to have it be like New Orleans, but they're in Hawaii, and it's always kind of something just sudden, like building on your point. Yes, this is like basically the reason they don't trust them is essentially because there's always just something going wrong. Like there's a copter that blows up in the distance that causes waves. No, literally, it causes waves because it crashes in the ocean. Get it? And it's always funny how it just like you say, it's like, who do they trust? They don't trust any of them. So yeah, it is kind of interesting how, yeah, for once, instead of going after dangerous drug lords or just gangsters, they're all just basically going after guys who are selling NCIS secrets. So yeah, it's basically New Orleans in Hawaii. But and then with just people who are just weird, we'll see if the weirdness grows on us. So
the coloring of the show's completely different to Hawaii Five-0 as well. You know, when you think of a show set in Hawaii, you expect lots of bright colors and it to always be like summer, and then NCIS Hawaii just dulls all those colors down.
It actually
feels a bit more, I suppose. I wonder if they're actually trying to get away from the LA coloring, because that is also bright, because you think of the beaches in LA.
The LA always looked like, before they were filming on an iPhone, it always looked like they were filming it on like a GoPro or something, like on someone's arm, and then using Adobe Paint. And it just always looked very junky, like they were trying to get the Expendables kind of crowd. Fun fact, the head guy who wrote NCIS LA was attached to an Expendables show for the longest time. Did not go underway. But yeah, no, that is a good point. It does seem to use a lot of the same cameras, and even, I don't think it uses the same directors, but it uses a lot of the same kind of Bourne Identity kind of looking style that New Orleans was using for a while, instead of dun, 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 you know, bright stuff on Hawaii. I would not be surprised if they have some of the same crew, but you know how it is. Whoever does the funding decides what kind of cameras and visual look they're going to use, and then you go from there. Whatever you got in the pilot, that's what you stick with. Yeah, no, I think you pretty much have covered it, though. I mean, it's going to take a while to grow on it. I'm curious to see where it'll go, but, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if it loses people after a while, or only lasts like maybe 3 episodes, or seasons, not episodes.
Yeah.
It's already lasted more than 3 episodes.
I'm calling it getting renewed for season 2. I reckon there will be a second season.
Oh, totally. But
from there, we'll see.
Yeah, I think some of it could be that it's just repetition setting in, and some of it could also just be there's so much to keep track of. Like, that's kind of how I was with Scorpion.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a fun show. I'm a big fan of Chuck and Prodigal Son, which was by Chris Videk and his crew. And it was kind of interesting how that show just kind of, it was straightforward and fun, but at the same time, it just was always on at a weird time, so I could just never keep track of it. But I would always dig the trailers and be like, oh, that's just funny. You know, it's not clever like Psych, and it's not quotable like Community, but I'm going to hand it to him. That's pretty fun. It's like, it's got something for the video game crowd, and it's got something for, again, kind of some of the guys who want something more light like NCIS. So I was like, okay. So it made sense that it crossed over like for a few episodes on LA. So that makes sense. That's the only reason this whole connection happened. These other shows were wise enough to only cross it over with each other. So since we pretty much have, how about we wrap up what we're currently seeing on NCIS and then go to JAG and then call this a night. So you and I are both really digging Gary Cole so far. Would you say this is kind of a rare? We knew he was coming, and we knew it wasn't long before Harmon was going to take off because his contract was up. You know, the character had been injured, and I mean, they did such a beautiful just send off of him, having Ducky talk to him and having a piano cover of the theme song play. I'm like, okay, you know, this is a very well done, heartfelt farewell, and not since the practice when they introduced the Boston Legal cast and crew can I think of when someone just took over the rest of the show and basically no one bitched, no one complained. I don't know if it was just the casting. I think it has to do with the casting because, I mean, we've seen Gary Cole play so many bosses and people in charge. I mean, he was Harvey Birdman, for God's sakes, and we've seen Office Space, but it's like, yeah, he's done voices, he's done sci-fi, he's played vice presidents, you know, on both Veep and The West Wing. It was like, yeah, it was like, so I'm seeing him in Office Space, I've seen him in all this other stuff. It was like, I that's some interesting casting. I want to see how he becomes the boss. And like we were talking about before in a previously unrelated chat and episode, is like, yeah, he tests everyone. He doesn't profile them, but he basically is like, do you want me to be like your old boss, or do you want me to be me? Are you cool with me being me? So now here's a question. I caught on this, and I asked my other friend of the show, on the Forever Adventure Time, who I just did a wonderful Longmire episode with. Shout out to Nathan Shell. Do you notice he was helping solve an investigation with McGee, and he made a reference to the Brady Bunch? Was that a double reference to him because he was in those Brady Bunch movies?
More than likely.
Because how could it not be? But I mean, this is checking. This is like some stuff we bring up, you know, it just seems like we just know it just because we're film buffs. But I mean, that was wild. It's like, I mean, when he got donuts for everybody, it was kind of like just testing. I don't eat that, but Agent Knight, who just joined the team, totally eats that. But McGee, you know, he's on a diet. He doesn't used to eat that when Tony would bring him. So, or he bought him. So yeah, I'm really tempted to see how it goes. And like you say, they didn't rush it. You knew these guys were going to become part of the team, just like Torres was there for a while before it became obvious, you know, that he's not only taking Tony's place, but being his own deal. And they gave him something witty or even brave in some cases to do and find out more about his troubled life that he never talked about. So I think they're definitely going to get comfortable and get wittier. I mean, clearly the guys who have been there since the beginning of time on that show know what makes it gel. So I don't think it will ever jump the shark.
No, and I think it helps with Gary Cole's character being so different from Gibbs. And it does help because you're not looking at it going, well, this is just a replacement. It's not. He's just he's filling a hole that is there, but he stands out for his own reasons. He's got his own personality. You know, you've seen his personality from the beginning. He's nothing like Gibbs. In fact, he didn't even like Gibbs at first. Which
he got fired.
Everyone seems to have this problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. They made just good references, like, I'm not like you, I don't work like you. And I think Gibbs, mainly what the writers hit on is like, he can't replace him, so all he can do is just be his own deal and be more than a replacement, just be a cool team leader. And it's like, and I think it's interesting because I think we're going to just, you know, unlike Gibbs, he is willing to come out of his shell. Obviously he did. I mean, he defended Gibbs, and because the FBI wanted to arrest Gibbs, you know, and he refused to do that because he saw that Gibbs was a neat guy who has his own way of doing things that, and he's like, yeah, why are we putting this guy behind bars when he wants to catch this guy who's, a former Marine turned serial killer, And it was just interesting, just that road tour and everything. We just had so much time to just reflect and just knew that it's like, okay, so whatever happens, this is going to happen. And now that we know these guys, as opposed to, last minute stunt casting, it's something. So yeah, within this last year, going on to the show that started it all, I have seen all of JAG. I've seen parts of it for years because it was just played endlessly on USA Network and even Hallmark of all places. But it was always kind of like Murder, She Wrote, where you didn't really have to see it all. And after a while, it did kind of just become Law and Order, but for the Navy. And I never found it as interesting, but I don't regret it at all. I think it helped that was another one. Just no one knew who Catherine Bell or David James Elliott or John M. Jackson were. And it was like, you might have known who John M. Jackson was if you had seen him as one of the similar JAG type guys on A Few Good Men. But yeah, I mean, they were relatively unknowns. Elliott had done a bunch of TV acting, and Catherine Bell was kind of an up and coming gal as well, who had been in the Dolph Lundgren war movie Men of War. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of another one. It wasn't funny, but just the characters just jived with everyone. It was a buddy show. But you also got a sense of, you were able to suspend some belief before they got to the whole, hey, there's these CIA guys who want to put you on a mission. You're ready for some action? It's like, who has time for that? But suspend reality. So my only intro to it previously was seeing where the NCIS characters first appeared on there, that 2-part episode. and it introduced us to Gibbs, Ducky, and Tony. So it was interesting, though, because there was another agent that they introduced on there, and the writers just didn't, and the audience didn't react to it well. That was one of the chief complaints, so they replaced her, and, we got Secret Service agent turned, NCIS gal, Caitlin Todd instead. But I don't think that gal did as bad as I remember her doing, but it was just one of those, just, to be fair, they didn't really give her anything to do. So it's like, yeah, whatever. Still a fun, exciting episode, and definitely one of the best ways to introduce Gibbs, because he is everything, all these other JAG guys aren't. And it's kind of interesting how he suspects, the main guys at first suspiciously. And so kind of shows how this is why they never really work together. They don't get along, But I mean, after a while, JAG always did kind of become kind of a fun action show. And like, after being kind of just for a while, just the military Navy crime show. And it is fun seeing how, I think after season 3, it really started knowing what it wanted to be, and it got a bigger budget. So that way you didn't have to see endless stock footage of every other Paramount produced military blockbuster. It's like after a while it got pretty old seeing stock footage of Crimson Tide or Hunt for Red October or Top Gun. It's like, good grief, guys, I've seen these movies a bunch of times. I want to see something I haven't seen. I don't know if you ever noticed that. It's like all the Navy footage was pulled from other giant movie blockbusters. No. So it didn't match up half the time. And since they remastered it in HD, it definitely didn't test well. It just Now, don't you find it funny though that Terry O'Quinn is on all of these shows? That's right, John Locke from Lost himself has recurring roles or guest spots on all of these NCIS Hawaii shows. It's like,
I know he's popped up in FBI Most Wanted as well.
Yeah, he can't escape NBC or CBS, can he? Yeah, no. You have any thoughts on JAG? Or
and that was one that I didn't watch that much. I caught episodes here and there.
You only saw it, and your parents avoided it, so he did to you. Okay,
yeah.
Good. I just would see parts of it, but it was one of those. I don't know. Some people kind of traded it like any Hasselhoff kind of show where they either liked it or they disliked it. But it was always,
Yeah.
they never liked it for the right reasons. That was what was weird. I'm like, really? I've heard good stuff about this show. And you're saying you like it because everyone's cute and it's kind of dumb. Well, I'm confused. So it is kind of wild, though, how, yeah, it was the launch pad. But honest to God, call me biased. NCIS is just kind of the director's cut of JAG. It was just 2.0. It just kind of took it above and beyond. Like, I love all the Law and Orders, and the CSIs are good in their own right, but they kind of, what they all both did good is they kind of just had their own identity. And JAG kind of took a while to get going, and then kind of realized, okay, so what's next? And then now let's kind of just go back to Magnum PI, but use a lot of the same kind of JAG style, but the legal side, that can take a backseat and just, we'll use some of those same characters on occasion. It's so wild how they have John M. Jackson's characters show up to defend Gibbs from a crime that you just don't think he'll be able to swing or get a jury to agree with. It's like, yeah, that show got comfortable with itself when it stopped being trying to copy Law and Order and just kind of be its own kind of Top Gun, Die Hard kind of show. But I think NCIS, just what it did better is that it kind of had everything you wanted in a movie blockbuster, and then it just had the office humor down. Even if you didn't find whatever joke's funny, you just couldn't help it. You're just like, I don't know why. I want to know what's on these guys' mind. And it's a fun group of craniums to have to pick. And so it's going to be interesting seeing what they do with Torres. And again, Agent Knight, has good chemistry with everybody. And again, Gary Cole is just hysterical. He's funny even when he's not funny. Gary Cole is Gary Cole. So, it is funny seeing how Mark Harmon is credited for all these episodes. Or is he going to pull a Ducky where he appears in just 5 episodes a season, but he's credited for the rest?
Possibly. I mean, he is also, one of the EPs on the show, and
yep, got to make that money, baby.
Is he not still classed as a series regular, which means he'd have to be billed?
That's true. Because this is literally like the show that cannot die. Like, I saw when some people were trying to spread rumors, like Polly Perrette really didn't like Mark Harmon all these years, and then started a false rumor that she got bit by his dog. Is like, no, where Mark Harmon goofed up is he let one of his dogs on set and he bit a crew member. And apparently Polly Perrette kind of had some issues with the Ziva actress. That was a rumor going around, and kind of infuriated a few NCIS fans when she said something that wasn't very kind about Caitlin Todd. And so it's like, I guess she was just done with the show after a while. She didn't want to play Abby, but it kind of got a little nasty behind the scenes to where she refused to film scenes in the same room as Mark Harmon, to where that's why in her final seasons with him, they're only seen talking to each other over computer screens. And the editors do a good job, but if you didn't know that personal history, you're just like, yeah, now that I know that history, it's kind of a little obvious. That's sad. I hate it when people work with each other and don't like each other. So, because sometimes it just comes across on screen and no editor can hide it. I heard stuff about that with The Good Wife. I haven't seen it, but I've always heard about how that was the case, how Archie Panjabi and Juliana Margulies wanted to strangle each other. So it's like, Jesus, guys, can't we all get along? And half the time it's just people coming late to set. Personally, I don't care. I just film my scenes and just don't speak my mind. But if I were on a show, but I get it. When people get impatient and everything, like I would hear that with even some of those sci-fi shows, like they were very picky about what guests they picked. They wanted to make sure it was someone who understood everything, and sometimes you just can't help it. You're going to have an actor who's just good at everything, but doesn't necessarily understand it. And just everyone works differently, And it's like, as long as you don't, I make everything. Some actors want to learn all the characters' stories or rehearse before the cameras turn on, and other people, they just want to show up and say the lines,
Yeah.
let their charisma cover everything up. So it just doesn't help that everyone's got a different style, and sometimes you can get kicked off a show or get denied certain offers if you didn't get along with one of the head stars of a show. So I don't know. I think everyone's going to, so did they actually confirm that DiNozzo is turning up, or is that still a rumor? I haven't followed.
That's still a rumor so far.
I can't picture them not bringing him back. I mean, Bull's going to end after like another season, I think. So bring him back. He's had time to breathe, and they've acknowledged the character. So if they bring Ziva back a few more times, that'd be great. But I'm satisfied with how her storyline concluded. It was just great fan service after all these years to just know she was alive and safe, and
Yeah.
still could actually take a joke once in a while through her, hardened lens. And I don't know. It's going to be interesting seeing how they factor Fornell into some of this and everything.
Yeah, because he's meant to be coming back for an episode. He was filming one a while ago, and they've mentioned him because it was Fornell who got Gary Cole's character to let Gibbs go.
It's so wild how he gets screwed over by the FBI, but yet his word still means something to them. They just had to play bureau politics. So, I mean, Fornell needs happiness in his life, especially after losing both a wife and a daughter, and his wife. It was always just so funny how they went back and forth on how Gibbs and Fornell used to be married to the same woman. And so it's like, that is just awkward, which means it makes for perfect comedy. And I mean, you mentioned Boston Legal. I kind of associated it with that kind of humor. It's just like, this is just wacky, just people doing everything other than what they're supposed to do, and yet they still, their brains are wired a certain way, so they're still able to do their job on time.
Yeah.
And arrest the bad guy 5 days later. Obviously the writing crew knows what works, so hopefully they keep doing another fun, they always manage to avoid kind of, I feel, making the crimes be repetitive. And in more recent years, I've been more impressed by what cast members they got. Like, even actors who were like real life Marines would get on there every once in a while, and you're like, wait, oh, that's right, I forgot. Everyone forgets so-and-so had that association. So that totally makes sense why they're showing up on this,
Yeah.
After a while, though, it did kind of be spot the West Wing or 24 actor on there. They'd always have some really cool actor be some warlord or terrorist. But I liked how it never became kind of the torture show or the, interrogate someone.
Yeah.
They pretty much would just always they would have the visual look, but they would always remind everyone, at the end of the day, we're here to make you laugh and have a premise that isn't too much to swallow. And it is kind of funny how, and kudos to him, for Rocky Carroll has now entered the world of directing. He's literally both the NCIS director and directing the show. So
yeah,
kudos, Leon. You're working double shift. If you have any other closing thoughts, in that?
No.
Well, it's awesome having you on here once again. And if you want to promote what you're blogging about next.
Yeah, so you can still find me at Precinct TV, Amazon Advisor, Hidden Remote, a few other fan-sided sites within the FanSided brand. And then follow me on Twitter at Ingham69.
For sure. Thank you ever so much for joining the crowd.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try?
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new podcast cure-all, sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of...
They must be destroyed on sight!
As needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of it.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history all popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be a
did you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our queue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. With a one-liner plot holes of gratuitous movies. It's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy. At eilfm.podbean.com.
Welcome to Who Was She podcast. I am your host, Tara Jabari. After a decade working in documentaries, marketing, and all things digital media, I found that podcasting is a strong medium to share stories. After years of producing for others, I decided to start my own biographical podcast. Who Was She will focus on the life of a woman throughout Baha'i history. The first season is about Lydia Zemenov. Lydia's story explores the subjects of the power of language and faith. Her father invented the universal language Esperanto, and she came from a Jewish family and became a Baha'i. She grew up during World War I and was killed during World War II in a concentration camp, despite heroic efforts to save her life. How can one person's life intersect with so many others, connect across borders, and inspire a biography which inspired this podcast? Over the next few weeks, I will share her story with you and the lives that were most affected by her and those who affected her life as well. They include her father, Ludwig Zemenov, her spiritual mother, American journalist Martha Root, and the Baha'i German soldier Fritz Mako, who worked for the resistance undercover while having to serve the Nazi Party. I want to thank the author Wendy Heller and George Ronald Publishing for their blessing to let me use Heller's biography, Lydia, The Life of Lydia Zemenov, Daughter of Esperanto, as a main and instrumental resource for this podcast. So please subscribe and learn about this amazing woman who traveled through 3 continents in an effort to bring unity through the power of language. You can also find more information on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Who Was She Podcast. Music was composed and performed by Sam Red. I am your host, Tara Jabari. Join us next time as we begin our journey about Lydia Zemenov.
Are you sick of the same old stale podcasts? Well, then join Vanessa and Darren as they dissect movies of all kinds. The 2 lifelong cinema lovers bring their favorites, curiosities, and first-time watches to the operating table and inject them with a healthy dose of snark. Then there's the waiting room, where they examine books and short stories. So just look for them on Apple Podcasts and where fine podcasts are available. They're part of the Legion Podcast Network. Follow them on Twitter at VDClinicPod. Join them on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/VDClinicPod. Or email them at vdclinicpod@gmail.com. They're ready to cure what ails you. And still, they just might be a little contagious.
Hi there. It's Heather from the Watching Netflix Without You podcast. Did you know that there are over 1,200 Netflix original feature films and documentaries? And that number is only growing. So I've made it my mission to watch as many as I possibly can. Then, with a delightful guest or guests, disclaimer, more often than not my brother Ryan, we spend an episode rating, reviewing, and discussing a film at length. The first half of every episode is spoiler-free for those who haven't seen it yet, and in the second half, after a very clear spoiler warning, we dive into it. And that's really about it. You can listen to Watching Netflix Without You on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and more.
We now continue with our program.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up review show.